if you think about it, the imperative that drives direct mail marketers to test everything, and they do. If you've ever been in direct marketing, you'll know the phrase, the control. Did it beat the control? After every email campaign, and there's testing every time, that they compare the numbers against the quote-unquote control. Why do they do that? Because there's an enormously high cost to every single piece of mail that a direct mailer sends. And as a result, they are very, very careful to test everything to make sure they're maximizing their ROI. With email marketers, the problem is because the costs are low, that the cost of any individual mailing doesn't have the same influence on how email marketers think regarding the importance of testing. And yet, the very reason that direct marketers test everything, that drive to maximize the return on their investment, is absolutely just as relevant and just as important to everyone doing email marketing. Marcus, can you go to the next slide, please? So relevancy group, well, a lot of what we do are surveys of marketers, and specifically email marketers. And what we found in some of the testing we've done recently, or the surveys, that we've done recently, that the use of any kind of testing on an ongoing basis remains very, very low among email marketers in general. The question here was, please select a statement or statements that best describe the email marketing tactics that you regularly use. And as you can see from this survey, less than a third of email marketers regularly utilize A/B testing. And again, we're asking for any sort of testing. And here, again, less than a third, really 28%, regularly utilize A/B testing. What that means, and only 26% conduct multivariate testing. And Mike is going to get into, what a good definition of what A/B testing is, because again, I always like to, I'm glad he's doing that, because a lot of times we throw around these phrases and terms and assume everybody knows specifically what we're talking about, and I know that's not always the case. So again, even if that is unfamiliar language to you, Mike will be going into that shortly when I turn it over to him. But what this shows us, what the survey result shows us, is the vast majority of email marketers really continue to roll the dice, and they're crossing their fingers when it comes to optimizing their campaigns. And yet when you consider the tremendous benefits that can be gained by putting the best message out there, the best content, the best offer, the best subject line into an email campaign, when you think about, again, the benefits of that, the number of people who regularly do any kind of testing is way, way too low. 28% is too low. Now, the good news is that if you're one of the 28%, you're ahead of the game. And if you're not one of the 28%, after the end of this webinar today, you're gonna have a better understanding and potentially tools to get with the people who are the winners in email marketing. Because you need to approach testing, particularly this time of year. You need to approach testing as if your job depended on it, because at the end of the holiday season, it just might. Marcus, next slide, please. Now, one of the reasons we believe, or one of the reasons I believe that the use of testing is low is understandable, in that we find that email marketers in general, are challenged across the board to find the necessary resources to tap into to maximize their campaigns. If you look at then from the same survey, if you look at the top 15 challenges when developing email campaigns, while none of them explicitly says finding people to do A/B testing, you will note that a vast number of them are specifically related to people. Number one reason, creative content development, the resources, that's a resource issue. It's not a technology issue, it's a resource issue. And, the first thing that should come to mind is you can't A/B test if you can't get enough content to A/B test, because A/B testing depends upon not just having the content you intended for the campaign, but the test content that you depended on for your campaign. So again, the fact that creative content development is a challenge, is reflected in how low the number of people who do testing is. Adequate staffing resources is another thing we've called out there, 22%. But even analyzing campaign results above that, between the two that I've called out there at 23%. Again, testing oftentimes requires that you go look at the results, you analyze them, and you make a decision. So again, when there's issues with having the people and resources on staff to do these things, it becomes a little more understandable why more people aren't doing it. Managing and monitoring the testing process takes people. And again, for many email marketers, they just don't have that oversight to make regular testing feasible. Last slide, Marcus. The brutal reality then, as we gear up for the holiday season, still is that if you don't have a testing strategy and you don't have a plan in place, you're placing your program at a distinct disadvantage versus those competitors, that 28% of yours who are focused on testing or trying to test regularly. They're going to be locked and loaded and tested and ready heading into the holidays. It really is, in some ways, the email equivalent of bringing a knife to a gunfight when you're going into the holidays, or as I like to say, bring a kitten to a gunfight, which is even worse, as you go into the holidays, again, when you're going up against people who are testing everything. Things you can't imagine that your campaigns are going to be optimized if you're not doing that. So how do you fix that? Well, your answer to the development of creative assets, to those analytical skills, may lie with your ESP partner and its services teams. They've got, most of the large ESPs have tremendous people on staff available to help you, and it's easier for them to keep these resources engaged than it is for you to do it in-house staff. So again, look to your ESP partner and see if they have the people that can do the creative and analytics. But your answer to how to manage the testing, you got the assets, people will give you the assets, people will give you the analytical skills, but you still need the technology to optimize your testing. So your answer to how to manage the testing process itself might be, in a more efficient and effective way, might lie in the tools you use. And that's part of what we're going to be, or actually what we're going to be looking at today and what Mike's going to be talking about. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
Great, thanks, Chris. Yeah, so, like you said, I think that the best place to start really is just to set the table first on, what A/B testing is, so we're all on the same page there, and at least what I mean when I say A/B testing. I think a lot of people think of A/B testing as, simply a horse race, right? You have two different versions of the email, and you want to know which one's better, so what the heck, let's just make them run side by side and see which one runs the fastest, and that must be the best option. And for sure there's a lot of truth in that, but that's not really kind of the core of an A/B test. An A/B test is all about sharply determining cause and effect, right? So for us as email marketers, what that means is finding true cause and effect in what we're changing in the email. So why would we need A/B testing to figure out that cause and effect relationship? Well, let's think of a hypothetical. Let's say that I have an idea for how to improve my email. And so, great. So let's say I put that change into place, and I see click rates go up. Great, but was that really because I changed the email? Was that really the true cause for that effect? What if before was a Sunday and after was a Monday? What if they were both Mondays, but what if before was a holiday and after was not? Or what if before was before the new iPhone came out and after is after the new iPhone came out, right? So how do you know what effect was truly caused by the change I made and nothing else? Well, the way we get to that is by borrowing the answer from the scientific method. We basically create two groups of people who are carefully selected to be very similar. We give one version, the new version, to one group, and we give the old version to another group. We call that control. And then any difference in the test group must be solely due to the change that I made. Because, and this is really important, because I designed it so that's the only difference between the two groups. So that's sort of the core base of A/B testing. It's all about defining control very carefully to precisely eliminate all the variables I don't care about or can't control, like if it's raining out, and read the impact of one specific variable, which is the thing that I have the ability to control. So that way you can take that cause and effect, that individual learning, and start building a library, if you will, of what kinds of things impact different factors. So that's A/B testing at a high level. So great. What is so bad about that? That seems straightforward enough, right? Well, let's look at what doing it right entails. So the first question is, what is this test going to look like, right? How many people should be in this test? How many should get A? How many should get B? How long should the test run for? Is it for an hour, or do I need to let it run for 3 hours? And then once I've figured out how big the test is going to be and how long it's going to run for and who's going to get A and who's going to get B, then I have to decide who exactly is going to get A and who's going to get B. And how do I carefully make sure that I don't accidentally give all my best customers A? Because that's going to totally screw up the A/B test. And randomization isn't a guarantee. In fact, when you randomly choose people for a test, you'd actually expect to have significant bias on 1 out of about every 10 important dimensions, depending on how much significance you want. And how do I do that? How do I do all that without always testing on the same people every single time? Because that's going to screw up your results too. But let's push past that. Let's say that I've set up the test and now I need to run it. Well, first I break the list into batches, and I send to test and control first. Then I have to watch the first batch really carefully to see which version won, and then I pick the one that did better, and I send that out to everybody else. But who actually wants to babysit that all day and see, oh, how is A doing now? Oh, how is B doing now? And do we really have to do that every single time we want to test something? Once I've run the test, I see those two different numbers, and how do I know if A really won? Right? So I think Chris made the point earlier. You know, your job may be on the line here. Would you stake your job looking at these two graphs on the fact that A is definitely going to work better than B? I don't know. How do I know if these results are real? What about something called regression to the mean, which is, yeah, you're always going to see a difference at the beginning, but you know, over time they're going to gravitate towards each other. How do I account for that? If I ran this exact same test again under the exact same conditions, how confident would I be that I'd see the exact same results? Sure, there are formulas in some stats textbooks or on some website somewhere, but do those formulas actually hold in practice with your customers given the way that you're using them? The answer is probably not. And should I stop listening after the time I decided on has run out? What if the answer for whether A is better or B is better changes as time passes? And by the way, it usually does. If anyone has taken the time to look at what happens in these A/B tests, this is what happens. What exactly am I supposed to do with that as a marketer? And this one is really important. We're marketers, right? So we're supposed to be thinking in personas and segments. We can't think of our customers as all one kind of person. My marketing professor's favorite phrase was, beware of averages, right? Because if we focus on averages, then we miss the underlying segmented behavior underneath them. And what we're looking at here are averages, right? Shouldn't we be digging in deeper? The question is, was A really best absolutely everywhere? What about with gold customers? What about on mobile? What about at home in the evening on an iPad? What about, and this is tricky, what about gold customers on mobile? What do you do there? And by the way, do all of these things really even matter, or are we just splitting hairs and not finding anything that's going to be helpful? And by the way, this is the most frustrating one to me. What if the world changes tomorrow? And by the way, it usually does. Right? I tested this a week ago, but is this really going to still be the case during Cyber Monday? What about now that my competitor is having a sale? Is it still going to work best in that case? Are my subscribers, frankly, just getting tired of my messaging over time? Sure, A, B 3 weeks ago, but then I hit them with A 3 more times. Is A still working better? Okay, so I guess then what I have to do is literally do the whole thing again, because everything I just learned might be obsolete now. Or maybe it's specific to Tuesdays, or maybe it's specific to when it was overcast out, right? You do have to retest to confirm, or else you're going to be driving through the rearview mirror. And this one's even harder, I think. So A, B, B, now what? Right? As I look forward to the next campaign and what I'm trying to do there, what is it exactly that I should carry forward from this test? Does this mean that if I tested 10% off versus $10 off, does that mean that 10% off beats $10 off every single time? Or is the learning that, percent discounts are better than dollar discounts? Or does it depend on the magnitude of the dollars and the percents? Right? How exactly do I build this? Do I fold this into a broader library of learnings to drive an integrated strategy for the best thing to say to each customer in each context? And look, after I put all this effort in to try and get something out of this A/B test, does it really even pay back? Really? I don't know how familiar these kinds of numbers look to folks on the phone, but for me, in my experience, this is usually the case. Right? I came up with a couple different options, and one of them, sure, worked a little better, but was it really worth all that effort to get this right? Where's all the lift that somebody promised me that I would get out of A/B testing? So, look, in theory, yeah, A/B testing is great, right? You use lots of Greek letters, and you carefully build control groups, and you execute steady, continuously monitored tests with statistical significance drawn from empirical Monte Carlo simulations, and then you segment the results constantly by every known data point that you have on your customers, real-time and otherwise, and you regularly are revalidating all of the learnings that you have in a comprehensive test and learn framework. And then your emails are perfect and personalized, and they're so performant, and your bonus is just through the roof, and you're getting handwritten thank you letters from your customers for crafting such wonderfully relevant messaging that you're sending them. And then you wake up, because that's not what happens. What we actually do is this. We take shortcuts. We do what's practical. And that's okay, right? 10% sounds like a good rule of thumb. We randomly pick groups and say that's fine. I'm not going to worry about anything else. We just look at the first batch and see what happened there, and we roll with it. We use websites to see if it's supposedly real, and we politely decline to segment the results or retest because that seems like a pain in the butt. And guess what? Somewhere along the line, we drop the lift on the floor because nothing actually happens. Yes, in theory, A/B testing is fantastic if you do real, rigorous test versus control analysis. It will drive significant lift for you. But the way that we water it down, it just doesn't. And here's the truth. If you're feeling bad about yourself right now, or if you're feeling like, hey, I'm dropping the ball by identifying with that right-hand column, you shouldn't. It's not your fault. I feel like Robin Williams in Go Bill Hunting. It's not your fault. A/B testing is it's too much of a blunt instrument to solve this really hard problem. I mean, the sort of the holy grail problem that everybody talks about is, how do I deliver the best message in the best way at the best time, right? And that we all love to talk about that. We know that that's the goal. And if you ask, how exactly do I do that? And somebody gives you the answer, oh, just A/B test your way to the right answer. That is a glib, oversimplified response from someone who hasn't actually lived it. The way I think about it is, it's like you're trying to guess a number between 1 and 1,000, only knowing if your last guess was too high or too low. And oh, by the way, you're playing that game with all of your subscribers all at once. And oh, by the way, they're changing their mind of what the number is on a minute-to-minute basis. Trying to A/B test your way through that immense puzzle it's a fool's errand. It absolutely is. So what is the alternative then? How do we actually get the value out of A/B testing that we really should without marshaling a small army of resources? Well, there are a few different pieces that I think are really important, and I'm going to take my time talking through them. So first, listen to what's happening in real time. So rather than sending out one batch, waiting an hour or whatever, coming back and checking and seeing what the results were, you need to continuously and automatically monitor the results as they're coming in and change what you're saying accordingly. Why is that important? Well, let's take one example. Let's say that you're telling your customer about a flash sale, right? If you take the traditional approach to A/B testing, if you say, well, look, first we're going to take the first hour and we're just going to sit back and we're going to learn, there'll be a 50-50 split, but then once we know the answer, we'll be able to capture tons of upside in the next few hours after that. Well, that's all well and good, but what if the flash sale's over by the time you know anything, right? That's too late. That's not the way that the world works now. It's not the way that consumers are interacting with your content, and it's not the way that you're going to be interacting with them. So the first piece I think is really important, which is you've got to be listening in real time. The second thing is you don't want to fall for the wrong answer, right? You want to lean towards the right answer. So what do I mean by that? Well, why does everything have to be black and white? Why do we have to go from, no perspective on which one's better and randomizing and showing, showing A to somebody and B to somebody else, to flipping immediately to, okay, great, A is definitely the best answer, let's show that to everybody. Why does it have to be so binary and discrete? Isn't there some kind of middle ground where I'm not totally sure if A is the best, but I might be? Shouldn't we start slowly and continuously leaning towards A as we gain confidence that it's the better option, rather than jumping to a conclusion? Because let's think about it. Look, if we're right about A being better, then great. We'll just keep leaning harder and harder on A until we're really sure that A is the best option. But what if we're wrong, right? What if that the rates that you read in the first hour of the test actually end up being wrong? Well, if you just jump to the conclusion that A must be right, you'll never figure that out, right? You might see that, oh, yeah, I guess ultimately the click-through rate that I saw came back down to earth, but you never tried B, so you don't know whether A was truly a better option than B because you stopped listening to B. If we're wrong and we start leaning, then we find out pretty darn quickly that A actually isn't holding up to be, all that it's cracked up to be, and we can shift our balance back towards the center. The third piece is to keep listening over time. So this is kind of related to the previous point, but why do we have to stop listening during the test? Why do we have to go from spending 100% of our resources on listening to 0% of our resources on listening and 100% on trying to capitalize on what we just heard? Why would we shut down and make a final decision after the first hour? Maybe there's something to be learned in the second and third and fourth hours. And that could take two different forms, right? It could be that the world actually changes in the second and third and fourth hour. Maybe people behave differently in their email at 9 a.m. than they do at 11 a.m. But maybe it's just, kind of further regression to the mean, and we can understand what is truly happening in the A versus B world as the test continues to go on. And it's not that we have to keep testing with everyone, but let's hold back at least a small chunk of the population and keep validating what we've learned. And the last piece, and this is where we found that a ton of the lift comes in, is that computers are your friend. I like to tell people to hug robots, but there are a lot of Roombas out there, and that might be dangerous, so you probably don't want to literally hug a robot. But the point is, computers are really, really good at some things, and humans are really, really good at other things. And kind of from a macro perspective, what we're moving towards is the sort of efficient marriage of what computers are really good at and what humans are really good at. Finding patterns in massive amounts of data that are streaming in real time, it's not your lane. I'm sorry. You're a wonderful artist. You can appreciate a sunset with the best of them, but you can't process high velocity data at scale. You just can't. Let computers find those patterns for you. See, they can sift through every single factor and combination of factors to find the most predictable patterns in the data. Not just the one that you happen to look at and think that it might be, and think that it makes sense to you and maybe we should roll with that one. And they can do that right off the bat and in real time as the data is streaming in, as opposed to doing it kind of on a one-off basis after everything has happened. So I know that that's a little abstract, so let's make this a little more concrete with a case study from one of our clients. So one of our clients is a leading points-based loyalty rewards company. And as I'm sure many of you know on the call, the sort of name of the game there is building this virtuous cycle that our client refers to as earning, burning, and learning. Right? So the goal is to get people to take actions that are valuable to the brand to earn some points. Then you can redeem those points or burn them on rewards that are meaningful to the customer and also related to the brand. But then there's sort of a third category of content, which is, just sort of softer, organic content that somebody might want to spend some time on that pulls them a little bit closer to the brand. So, for example, if it's a travel program and it's about, where are the coolest places to go this time of year. So they had always struggled with when do we feature what kind of content and to whom? Right? That's actually a pretty core problem that they have, but it manifested itself very specifically in their sort of weekly newsletter, right? What kind of content do we feature in the hero image of this newsletter? Do we try and get them to earn points? Do we try and get them to burn points? Or do we back off a little bit and just give them interesting content? Well, in the past, they had tried A/B, or I guess in this case, ABC tests, and had not really. They had, 1 week burn would beat earn, and that would be great, and then the next week earn would beat learn. And they were never really all that different, and they never drove a ton of ROI from it. There was never any kind of comprehensive strategy for that. So what we did is we stepped in and helped them implement the kind of A/B test that I was just describing, which we call an autonomous A/B test, or I guess an autonomous ABC test in this case. And so from their perspective, all it looked like was changing, a line of code in their email to, instead of pointing to, a static image, it would point to our servers, right? And as they sent out the email, data would start streaming into our servers, and we could help them make intelligent decisions. So, on the surface, what we would see as the data started streaming in is this. And again, my guess is this looks pretty familiar to anyone who's run an A/B test before. Do you really think that one of these is like really dramatically higher than the other? And is this gonna make you a hero marketer if you pick, learn over earn? No. And honestly, if I ran this again next week, it would probably be totally different, right? So what's to be gained from that? If you stopped here, and I would not blame you if you did, because that's what almost everybody does, you'd miss a really interesting piece of the puzzle. So you probably look at this and say, oh, I guess, earned content isn't really the best thing to go with here, right? It's a little bit too much of a hard pitch. Nobody's really going to take advantage of the earn opportunities that we have. So let's just back off and make this newsletter be about learning content. But remember what I said about being beware of averages. If you dive into that 14.7%, there's actually a really interesting story going on there. So yeah, overall, the average was 14.7%. But if you look at people who, one, were not on a tiny little screen, they were on a tablet or a desktop, and B, had recently, within the past, I think we decided it was 6 weeks, or I should say the computer found that it was 6 weeks, had recently taken another earn activity, or in other words, you had shown to the brand that you're sort of in the points earning mindset, then the click rate was actually dramatically higher, right? But if you're on a mobile device, and this kind of makes sense, are you really going to take an action? And these are typically sort of, large actions like making a booking. Are you really going to take that action if that's presented on a mobile device? No, probably not. Right? And the same kinds of patterns existed in each one of the other bars as well. And so the key is, if you take all of those patterns and stitch them together into the optimal segmented strategy, you get dramatically higher performance. And so in this case, and this is oversimplified, but in this case, here's the patterns that we found automatically. And this is cool, I think, because it makes a ton of intuitive sense. First of all, if you're on a bigger device, which I think we found is a signal for having the cognitive capacity to really engage with the content in this moment, or to take a bigger action. If you're on those bigger devices, then it depends. If you have a really high points balance and you actually have the capacity to burn points, then yeah, showing them burn opportunities is a great way to go. But if they don't have a ton of points, but they have recently taken an earn activity, recently being, I think, 6 weeks or so, then yeah, the earned content works great because this is the exact context in which it's best to be talking to them about that. But if they haven't really bought into the program yet, if they don't have any points, if they really haven't taken an earn activity recently, or they just don't have the cognitive capacity for it, then the best thing to do is just try and draw them into your brand by showing them, a quick piece of content that they can digest in 15 seconds. That's sort of the best thing to say to them at this moment in the customer journey. And that might seem subtle, but let me get back one slide, sorry, Marcus. And that might seem, and I think this is a really important point, that probably seems kind of subtle, right? How big of a deal is it for us to get this perfectly optimal segmented strategy? Well, it does move the needle pretty dramatically, we found. That's how you get all the lift out of A/B testing, right? Is you do everything that you're supposed to be doing. You dimension the test correctly, you segment the results and find the patterns, you stitch together this optimal strategy, and that's when you do find these really interesting patterns falling out of your consumer behavior, and you're able to take advantage of those in real time and pick up the lift immediately. And the most valuable piece that actually came out of this for our client is that this was a one and done kind of thing, right? So this portal that we established in their email continues to live on, and this pattern continues to evolve over time because we're listening as we speak to how folks are interacting with this newsletter and learning, look, is this pattern still true or has it shifted around a little bit? We're incorporating new data points, we're incorporating new potential options and figuring out, what is the right thing to do here. And guess what? Our client doesn't have to go to bed, guilty at night because they didn't spend their day A/B testing because the A/B testing is going on for them behind the scenes. So, in summary, I think, point number one, I'd say that that Chris made is that, do you have to test? Yes, you do have to test. I mean, you don't have to test, but it helps if you're not independently wealthy, as he so eloquently pointed out. So great. Given that we have to test, in concept, testing is straightforward and it does drive lift. But in practice, we have to water it down because we can't do all that by hand all that well. We're marketers, not machines. And as a result, it just doesn't move the needle. But if we listen in real time, keep listening over time, lean rather than fall towards the right answer, and look for patterns with artificial intelligence, then you do all the things that you're supposed to be doing with a test and learn strategy, and the needle actually does move. And the best part is, it really is less work than trying to do it all yourself. So at this point, I think I'd like to pass it back to Chris and see if he has any thoughts on what we just talked about.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Mike. That was really, really great stuff. And you've made, and I'm going to turn it over to questions from the participants as well. So don't despair. But you made a very compelling case here, not just that A/B testing is important, which we both agree, but that there's a better way of doing A/B testing. Most platforms, most ESP platforms enable A/B testing, but typically in sort of the test and learn format that you were saying is not the best way to do it. In light of that, what specifically then does Wiley bring to the table to enable the approach you're talking about? How does Wiley's technology complement? If my ESP, as I said, already says it can enable A/B testing, what does Wiley bring that enables it to do this? Because I agree this is a better way to do it.
Yeah, so, the kinds of tools that typically exist off the shelf for doing A/B testing will do the kinds of things, will enable you to do the sort of former version of A/B testing, right, where you can do batch and roll. And there are some elements of what I'm talking about that you can sometimes accomplish, but what we do is we provide a sort of dead simple service that we can plug into your email by dropping in, literally a line of code that, A, acts in real time, and B, applies this real-time machine learning to figure out the patterns and what's going on and just kind of, serve up the right thing to the right person in the right way. Abstracting away all the test dimensioning and test design and continuing to listen over time, that's that's something that our computers can handle, so you don't have to think about, typing it in by hand into an interface.
Well, okay, interesting. So let's say I'm on a mid-market platform. I'm not on one of the enterprise platforms that have the A/B testing built in. Are you suggesting then, if I have a platform that has very, very rudimentary A/B testing tools, or perhaps none at all, that doesn't matter because your solution doesn't require anything in the platform? It's sort of an all-in-one A/B testing tool?
Yeah, correct. Yes, and it actually, at the core level, can be ESP agnostic, right? So it can literally be as simple as, let's take the HTML that you were going to blast out in your email. Let's change one line in that email and have it point to our server, and that's the extent of it.
Wow. So, that's really then valuable, and I hadn't thought of this before, but for a mid-market retailer, that could be hugely advantageous because they don't currently have the tools to do any of that, and you've not only got the tools, but it's simple to deploy, and it's a better solution. So that's great. If I took what you were talking about in my mind to sort of a logical conclusion, in some ways you're sort of evangelizing that this is just the way people should do offer presentation, period. In other words, it's really almost beyond testing to, this is the way you should do email. You should always have this deployed. You should always be maximized. You should always follow sort of the summary you said here. And again, I'm saying, so it's not really testing. It's almost a new way of emailing. Am I taking it too far, or does that make sense to you?
No, I think it does. I think that, the way that we think about it is, you got to start with your goals, right? And your goal is, in some way, shape, or form, it's to deliver the best message in the best way at the best time to each person, right? And once you unpack that and say, okay, well, great, but how do I do that? How do I figure out what the best option is? It should boil back down to A/B testing, right? So the A/B testing is sort of simply the sort of implementation detail of the how. How do you get to that best solution? But the what are we actually trying to accomplish here, and what can this approach really push us towards, is truly just what is the best content to put in this email at this point in time.
Right. So it's almost, I guess you could call it the permanent test, because as you say, it's still, there's elements of testing because you're doing either or, but it never ends. It's ongoing. Right.
That's right. Yeah.
All right. Well, this category, what you guys do has sometimes been called, and I think even Wiley refers to it as adaptive content, which I think is a great descriptor. And you're not a category of one. There's other folks that do not necessarily apply what your tool can do in the way you are to A/B testing, but can determine at time of open what may be the appropriate content to show. So, tell me a little bit, how is Wiley different than other folks who are offering sort of somewhat similar solutions?
Yeah, so there are a couple things. At its core, the biggest thing is that most adaptive content solutions, in fact, almost all that we know of, the input is, tell me the rule that you want to run. Right? You have to say, when it is raining, show this. When it's not raining, show this. Or when the sale is over, show this image. But before the sale is over, show that image. Or, when it can support playing a video in the client, then give it a video, but when that's not the case, show this, right? So the input into that adaptive content has to be a list of whens and thens. What we do is automatically figure out what those whens and thens should be, right? And we do that in a continuous, ongoing fashion. So we will figure out, oh, hey, I bet you may not have thought of this, but did you realize that this kind of product tends to resonate when it's really cold out after it's been, unseasonably warm for 5 days? That's the kind of thing that, sure, eventually you might find your way towards that pattern, but you really just got to let the computer find it. And then the other way that we tend to differentiate is that, we know that that adaptive content is kind of a new and exciting thing, and there's lots of different things that you can do with adaptive content. A/B testing automation included. But we're just at the beginning of that. And it's really important to think through how might this fit with your brand's concept, and what is the sort of most interesting way to be applying it for your specific use case. And we think that, handing you, a platform and saying, best of luck is kind of, an unfulfilling way to really get the best out of adaptive content. So, we like to spend a lot of time with our clients, thinking through their strategic email goals, looking at their upcoming calendar, and helping them figure out the best way to be applying the technology to get as much lift as possible, because that's ultimately in both our best interests.
Right. So you solved, in some ways, one of your points of difference is that you're also solving for the fact that people are resource constrained, and so deploying your technology solution doesn't require as you were pointing out, a whole lot of people to think through the setup, that the machine sort of does that through its own artificial intelligence, which is great. And I love the flash sale example of testing, because again, as you pointed out, and it's something I've seen working with many of our clients through the RFP process who are flash sale sites, that is the biggest issue, is how can we test when everything's got to be out and in an email box in 15 minutes, and this seems to solve that. So great stuff. I have other questions, but I don't want to take up all the time with my questions. So Marcus, if you have any from the folks who are listening in, I'm going to toss it over to you.
Sure, that's fine. Yeah, we just had one come in. I would encourage people to use the portal if they would like to submit additional ones. The question that we have here is very cool, perhaps a little intimidating. How does somebody get started with something like this?
Yeah, no. So I think, if you were to try and attack this, by hand, I think it would be really intimidating. The process really is as simple as, hey, let's take a look at one of the emails that you're sending out today, right? And let's take a look at, one element of that email that, could stand to be different. Maybe it couldn't. Maybe it'll be a worse idea, but let's at least, start by testing it. We pick one element of that email, and let's just turn it into a simple, really an A/B test. Let's just have two different variants of, for example, the call to action button, or maybe it's the hero image, or maybe it's the specific offer or product that's being featured. Then the process is literally as simple as you send us those two versions of the creative, and then we pass back to you a single line of HTML that you put into your email, and the rest is kind of all done on our side. So the simplest way to get started is to focus on, I think, as with any test and learn process, it's to focus on one individual test. Don't have sort of paralysis because you're trying to figure out, what is the grand scheme. Just start testing, right? Start learning one little thing off the bat, and then as you get the insights from that test, and not just the insight of, hey, the blue button worked better than the red button, but the insight of, hey, neither one of them worked well at all with this segment of customer in the evening. That kind of feedback, we found, becomes a virtuous cycle where now that marketers can really easily see the patterns of where their content is working well and where it's working worse, it helps them come up with sort of new ideas for, well, gee, maybe we should try a green button now.
Excellent. Chris, I have no other questions from the floor at this point, so I'm going to turn it back to you in case you have any further questions.
Yeah, I have one sort of one closing question, which is, so Mike, all right, I'm sold. I'm on the call and I'm sold, and I want to have this thing up and running by Cyber Monday. So I've got basically 2 weeks from, no, I've got a week. Wow, God, Thanksgiving's next week. I got a week from Monday. Can you have me up? If I let you know, but when do I have to let you know so that I'm testing something on Cyber Monday? Is it too late, or can you get me up?
No, not at all. I mean, I apologize for sounding like a broken record, but really the only inputs that we need are, the versions of the creative that you're thinking about testing, and we will pass back to you a code snippet. You put that code snippet in your email, and our cloud system's already up and running and ready to capture the data coming in and find patterns. So that really is how simple the implementation is.
And we did just get a final question that came in here, Mike, and that question is in regards to, you mentioned you're tracking device, you mentioned weather a couple times, time of day. Are there other variables that Wiley uses on a regular basis that they'd be looking at?
Yeah, so it generally boils down to, so there's the three core things that we see, which is geography, time of day, and device. But then there are really interesting variants off of that if you combine them. So for example, geography and time of day, you can pull in weather. Or you can take geography over time and figure out, are they at home or are they at work? You can take device over time and see, are they on a new device? Did they just get a new iPhone? Or are they still on their iPad from 2009, like some of us on this call who will remain unnamed? But the key is taking, and that's the kind of data that we see for free by being present in the email. The key is marrying that with in addition to sort of first-party data that brands have by interacting directly with their customers in a deeper way.
Excellent, and I think we got another question that came in while that one was being asked, and I think it was a very similar question. What more specific types of testing results have you seen from your solution? So that's kind of what you're getting at there, right, Mike, is kind of the relationship between those variables. Yeah.
So there are so many different kinds of applications. There's conversion-oriented stuff, right? So there's calls to action, there's hero images, but there's also customer lifetime value-oriented testing too. The sort of metric that we're optimizing against doesn't necessarily have to be a click today, right? It could be lifetime value over the course of the customer. It's tough it's really tricky to boil it down to any one sort of specific thing, because it really is anywhere that you're currently applying some kind of test and learn approach right now. There's no reason that the machine learning can't be brought in to do it in an automated way for you.
And to be clear, another question just came in. We've talked about some of the Wiley data, but you're not just using Wiley data, you're actually putting this in, you're using customer data as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So even in the case study that we talked about, sure, we know the device and, we know those things, and great, and that might be an important factor. But what really sort of opens it up is when you combine that with data that our clients have, like when was the last time that they bought something from you, or how much have they bought from you over the course of a lifetime, or any sort of demographic data that you might have about them. Marrying those two things together really does have a really powerful combination effect. It's not just additive. So we really push our clients to sort of let us tap into their rich data as well.
Excellent. Chris, that's everything I have from my end. Anything else from you?
No, I'm good. That was absolutely outstanding. Really interesting stuff, Mike, and great and great explanation of everything. Very, very easy to understand.
Outstanding. And we do have, once again, got a couple questions coming in about the slides. Slides will be made available to everyone. So if that's everyone, on behalf of Chris Marriott and Mike Montero, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. On behalf of Wiley, which you can learn more about Wiley at WYLEI.com, and also Relevancy Group, Chris Marriott as well. His URL is up there as well. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great rest of the week.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
For your time.